Welcome to the podcast Life After Addiction and Indictment. I'm your host, Steve Cloward, and I spent most of the last decade and well over $100,000 on coaches, consultants, masterminds, and events trying to figure out how to reclaim my life again. On this podcast, I'm going to share the tools, the tips, the tricks, and the hacks that allowed me to forgive myself so that I could reclaim my life again. I'll be interviewing experts in mindset, leadership, entrepreneurship, sales, marketing, branding, and so much more. I'm glad you're here. Sit back and relax and enjoy the show.
Let's go! This is Life After Addiction and Indictment.
Hey folks, welcome to Life After Addiction and Indictment. Today, I'm really excited about the guest that I've got here today. It's a gal who is just an incredible entrepreneur. She's got, I believe, 3 different podcasts. She was voted number 16 the last 2 years on Podcast Magazine's list of top 50 moms in podcasting. She was also awarded Entrepreneur of the Year and nominated for a People's Choice Award and a Champion Award by Businesses from Heart 2020 to 2022. So really excited to have Michelle Elise Abraham on the show today. How you doing, Michelle?
Well, thanks, Steve. I'm doing so great. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I think as we talked briefly before, podcasts are such a great platform. If you set things up and, are intentional about, the outcome you're looking for. And, with your expertise and the business you're in, I'm really excited to, have you give kind of some insights about podcasting. And, I think it's obviously becoming much more, I guess people are becoming much more aware of them, obviously, than years past, but there's still so many people, I think, that don't even really think about it. I know a lot of people don't ever listen to them. That's really the place I go to for, whatever topics I'm interested in at the time. And so, what got you into podcasting?
Yeah, I think you and I have swallowed the excitement pill of podcasting, so we get it. But I think there's still the rest of the world. I think over 75% of the US alone don't know about podcasting still yet. So isn't that crazy, right? There's 3 million podcasts out there already published, and there's still room for your voice if you're thinking about podcasting. If you're listening to this, that's not there's just there everyone's got a unique voice and needs it. And what started me as a diving into this crazy world of podcasting, it was actually like 10 years ago, which is even crazier because
Wow.
back then I remember it was like I'd ask my friends like what podcasts you listening to, and I get like this like weird look like what the heck is what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, I guess no one else listens to these things, but I love them. They were so cool. And I started listening in a kind of a strange way. Like when I became a new mom, I found myself for the first time slowed down. I had a busy fitness business before, and so I didn't really have a lot of time before. And so being slowed down at home, I remember playing on the floor with my son and loved being a new mom. But I kind of got into this funk of, going from a busy business to brain mush was not really the greatest thing for me. So I remember playing with him on the floor one day and I was like, well, I'm going to look on Apple TV. I'm sure there's some sort of audio program we can listen to while we're playing on the floor, and I can still be a good mom, but also glean some great, new content. And sure enough, I found a couple of shows, and it was just one of the shows was Jamie Tardy's Eventual Millionaire. And she was the woman who then helped John Lee Dumas start his show. And so she's been around for quite a long time. And I think her show is even still going today. But I loved listening to the inspiring stories of entrepreneurs. Like I remember the founder of UGG Boots was on there, and
Oh, wow, yeah.
just talking about the idea they had and then taking this business to crazy, crazy levels and all the ups and downs. And I got hooked on listening to all these stories, and they were inspiring. And so soon enough, we were listening not just on the floor in the house, but I put my earbuds in and take him for a walk, and we'd listen to every episode she'd ever published already. So that's what we would call binge listening. So listen to all of the episodes she had, and then I would eagerly wait every Monday morning for her to drop an episode. And I remember thinking, I'm out here with my earbuds on, ready to go for a walk. And if she hadn't dropped that episode, I would have been pretty mad. So I've always had myself as a listener in mind when creating podcasts now, because knowing that, although sometimes you're like, hello, is anyone listening? Anyone out there? So we don't get a lot of feedback as podcasters, but I always remember, like, had she not put that episode out that Monday morning, I would have been pretty mad. So, and so I
I
think
know
that's
that
been
feeling.
really,
Yeah, I've got a
yeah.
couple like that, and one does a daily, and it's what it's probably going to be terrible, but it's what works for me.
Mhm.
Once I get in bed, after me and my wife are done chatting, maybe we watch something for 30 minutes. Then when I roll over to go to sleep, unless I'm just dead tired, I put one of my earbuds in and I go to the same podcast every time, and he drops
Mm,
daily. And it just, I don't know what it is, whether it must be something to do with his voice, because it's very
yeah.
rare that the topic, and it's not that I'm not interested in the topics, but it's very rare to grab me to where I then, stay up. It has happened, but
Mm,
it's just, so yeah, once you get in that habit, like you said, and you're looking for that next one,
yeah.
and there's some that I use up, I feel the same way about, that are weekly. But because the content, once you find that value or those interests that you have, it's just, yeah, there's just great stories or great information that's so powerful.
Yeah, and I think we have this joke in our family too. If my son doesn't turn out to be an entrepreneur, we're not sure what happened, because he listened to so many entrepreneurial podcasts when he was a baby. I've been like in the car while we were out for
That's,
walks, while we're in the house,
that
and so
subconscious
I was,
programming.
yeah, he was 10 last summer, and he said, "Hey, I want to make some money this summer, and I want to sell some, chip and pop by boat over to the beach. We live on the lake." And so I was like, there's that entrepreneurial spark
That's cool.
already.
That's
Yeah.
great.
That's funny.
Wow. So what was the first podcast that you started?
Yeah, so the first one I started actually is no longer up on iTunes, but it was called RV There Yet.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was interesting how it kind of all started. And this is a way to get a podcast out there, which I still teach today. I think it's an interesting way of doing it. So the podcast started because I wanted to take my family on an adventure. We wanted to get an RV. We wanted to drive it from Canada to California, and you live in it for a few months, and just have a fun adventure. I knew nothing about RVing. My husband knew nothing about RVing. We never really even been in one. And so I decided to create a RV family summit. And so the whole point was I was going to interview 25 RV experts that have like YouTube channels, or, podcasts, or, whatever. They were already influencers in the RV family space. And so I
Mhm.
reached out to all of them. They all said yes. And I was like, great, I've placed like 25 amazing people. And so I interviewed them all, and I was like, how am I going to make the most out of this? And I wanted to do this summit, but the summit was only going to last a few days. So I decided when I was about to interview them all that I do the first 10 minutes of the interview all about them, who they are, how they got started RVing, and use that as a podcast episode. So at the end of the recording, we had the podcast episode, the summit recording, and then we ran the summit live. It went for a couple of days. It was great, a lot of fun. We had lots of new leads into it. And then after the summit went live, I took the recordings of the summit and I turned them into like a package for $47. And then I published the podcast. And as the episodes were going out, we were promoting the $47 summit recordings to listen to all the extra, all in-depth interviews of all these experts. And so the podcast, the summit, and the podcast recordings made about $7,500, which actually we were able to buy an RV for $7,500. And we went down, we spent 6 months in our RV from November to March one year. And our kids were like 1.5. My daughter just turned 2. My son was 5. We took him out of kindergarten, and we went down. We spent 6 months in the RV. It was so much fun. We came back, and then we turned around and we sold the RV for about $12,000. So we made money
Wow.
on the trip, and then we ended up having that whole trip done for, at the end of the day, we came out ahead $5,000 from what we spent on the trip and what we paid for the RV. So it was a really cool
That is a
experience.
powerful lesson for people listening.
Yeah.
So, think, because there's so many people, I believe, that, you know, either whether it's fear, life experiences maybe that has got them afraid to go after, their dreams and,
Mhm.
have their own business. And, you have to understand that there's so many different ways to make money. And I mean,
Mhm.
that sounded like that was a blast,
It was so much.
and
Yeah.
yeah. And I think the critical important thing, that I hear is, you know, being intentional about what you're doing, and
Mhm.
having a plan. And maybe some of it you thought of as you were going, but for the most part, it sounds like, you knew you had a plan, you were doing what you're doing. I mean, to get those top 25, people that were basically influencing the space. I mean, that just brings instant credibility, from those type of people. And
Yeah,
then to
and
repurpose your content and monetize it.
yeah.
It's just
And the
brilliant.
funny thing that happened actually is we were able to meet up with some of them on the road while
Oh,
we were
yeah.
traveling because we were all part of this family RVing group. And so we actually met some of them live. And then because of the summit I was associated with it, I became a speaker in the RV space.
That's
So
cool.
I was asked to come and talk about podcasts and summits and stuff at a lot of the RV conferences and stuff like that. So it's a funny way, it was an interesting way to merge into that, lining up with that credibility and aligning up with that experience that made me an expert and a thought leader in that space in a very
Yeah,
short period of time. So
that is very
it was
cool.
a really fun. I mean, my goals in life has always been to get paid to have fun and play. So that was right along the lines with that.
That is such a great model. I've been to some masterminds and things, and one of the guys that, I've been to a couple of his is, you can see the way he's doing it is he's getting, others to finance basically his fund, his recreation, whether it's
Mhm.
taking everybody to a suite at, one of the NBA teams in his town's game, things like that, and you just build that into the price of your mastermind or whatever. And, that's very cool. But yeah, that's a big lesson for people to hear and learn, is there's so many different ways. I mean, so as you did that, like you say, you know, how, you use that for a certain reason, which
Mm.
fulfilled what you were looking to do for you and your family, which is fantastic. And then did you pivot off of that fairly soon when you did your next podcast, or what was the next?
Are you tired of paying exorbitant monthly fees for your in-home entertainment? Do you wish there was a way to bring quality and affordable entertainment right into your household without a monthly subscription? Well, look no further. Introducing the VC Box Android TV Stream Box. Since 2020, VC Box has been enriching people's lives all over the world, and now it's coming to North America. Say goodbye to scattered subscriptions and countless apps. We've got all your streaming in one place. This is the best fully loaded Android TV box provider in North America. Our user-friendly interface makes navigation a breeze, and with the voice remote featuring Google Assistant, finding your entertainment has never been easier. The VC Box V2 Pro Android box is the epitome of convenience. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your favorite shows and movies with just a few simple voice commands. And the best part, no monthly subscriptions. That's right, you heard it correctly. Say goodbye to those pesky recurring fees and hello to endless entertainment. Join the VC Box revolution and elevate your entertainment experience. Don't miss out on this amazing opportunity. Visit our website and order your VC Box now. Bring home the VC Box today and bring endless joy and excitement to your household. VC Box, unleash the power of entertainment.
Yeah, while we
Right.
were on the RV trip, I started actually getting some other podcasters as clients. So we were then doing podcast management or helping people launch shows. So luckily, my business was at an early enough stage when we did the RV trip because it was really hard to find good Wi-Fi in the RV parks.
Oh yeah.
And this is where I soon realized I needed a team of people to be doing this, not me, because if I was going to be traveling around here having fun with unreliable Wi-Fi, their shows still needed to go out. So I started creating a team of podcast managers. So I was training the podcast managers on how to manage a show. Because one thing that I noticed is that when I launched a show, so we had my own show, which was the RV There Yet one. And then soon after that, we started Amplifyou podcast. So we were interviewing other podcasters about their podcasting journey and also experts who could support podcasters in their journey. And as I was starting my own shows, we started realizing that I am really good at the interviewing part and the people part, and the getting people part, but the editing and the text stuff is not really my thing. And if it's not really my thing, chances are it's probably not most of the people who are wanting to do podcasting thing
Bingo.
either. And so we really believe that, you should stay in your zone of genius. And so I started teaching some of our team members on how to do the podcast management. And so we just grew from there. We now have a team of 10 podcast managers that manage anywhere between 7 to 20 shows each. And they're all, we've hired them intentionally because they're either a single parent at home and they can make money doing this while they're raising their
That's
kids,
great.
or, their significant other works and they're still at home with kids and they can do this part-time. So we have, or they're young and they're in school and they're doing this while they're going to school to fund their education. So we built a team of people that are really using this new skill as a way to build the lifestyle that they want to, kind of like we do as well. So it's been really cool to see it grow over the last few years. And we've launched about 400 shows. And
Wow.
our team manages about 80 shows a week for our clients. So they're publishing and editing about 80 shows a week. So over the course of the month, that's like 300 and something shows they get to
Jeez.
publish. Mm-hmm.
That's cool. I love how you were intentional about the type of people you wanted to, hire
Mm-hmm.
to, because you're serving people in a way that, that helps them out. That's really cool. Rather than just
Yeah, if they,
finding someone that knows that stuff already. And,
exactly.
that's great.
Well, and what I found is that it wasn't really a skill that someone could just go and learn in school, because you have the audio engineers and those guys, but they don't know how to do like the graphics and the audiograms
Right.
and so it's kind of like a weird like mix of talents that you need in order to publish a show, right? You got the tech skills, but you've got the graphics, you've got the creative stuff, you've got the writing of the show notes, you've got, thank God for ChatGPT these days, because that helps us
Yeah.
with that. But you've got all sorts of, you got the website publishing and you've got like the techie stuff. So it is really a weird skill set that not many people just come with the skill set already. So we thought, well, why don't we just teach people all of it at the same time so that they can understand, they can use that skill then for a lot of other things that are
Right.
transferable to other career paths they want to go on. And actually a couple of our girls that do the podcast management for us, they were in school, and like the shows that we had lined up for them to work on were very much in alignment with their life school or their life coaching stuff they were doing. And so
Cool.
it was really helping them, listening to all these inspiring shows as part of their work. So it's pretty cool.
No, that is, I mean, it seems like everything you've done just piggybacks one off to
Yeah.
the other to benefit the next step, which is
Mm.
just fantastic. That's really cool. I mean, there's a lot of people who I've run into that, say, well, I don't have an idea. I don't have a product. I don't, whatever. And, or I don't have a topic that I'm passionate about,
Mm.
but there's a lot of, you know, first of all, you can figure that out if you just really think, because everybody has something that they're interested in, and, whether it's a hobby or something that's going to be a career. But I mean, that RV story is fantastic story for people to understand that, hey, you could go, I'm thinking of golf because I like to golf, someone could go tour a bunch of golf courses and, interview the pros or whatever, a bunch of golf courses. There's just so many unique things you can do. And then
Yeah.
when people are thinking, well, okay, well, you gave a bunch of ideas how you could monetize the content by cutting it up and putting it into a course or whatever. And but you can also, there's tons of products out there you can sell and get paid to sell other people's products,
Mm,
Um,
absolutely.
what do you,
It's funny you mentioned golf because we have these two girls right now that are our clients, and they're looking at getting into college. And so they're using the podcast as a project to show on their resume to get into college. And one of them is on the golf team. She got a scholarship on the golf team. And so her podcast is interviewing other golf pros about
wow.
that to help her get into school. And then her sister's doing one on dentistry because she wants to get into the dentistry program. So she's done one on dentistry for kids. So it's really cool. Like I never thought about using it as
So
a project to model to get into school. So I thought that was a really cool idea. So there you go. The golfing one's a good one.
that is great. But and then the thing that's to me is cool because I wasn't a book guy. I mean, I wasn't a school smart. I didn't like school, but it's like you said, is they're doing something that they're interested in going into whatever, they're learning by just doing the podcast portion, based on the interactions they're having and stuff. So, to me, that's the best way to learn if you could do something you're interested in.
For
And
sure. I also think like doing the podcast in that way is actually you're going to have a much better podcast, because if you're like, hey everyone, I'm going to go learn this, come on the journey with me as I discover this, and you're kind of like the reporter and you're out there finding
Yeah.
experts and interviewing them and talking to them, that's actually way better than like, hey, I'm the expert on this and this is what you need to do. And those shows tend to burn out at about 20
Wow.
episodes and pod fade very quickly because they run out of things to say. So like bringing people on this exploration with you makes a much better podcast. And you know how we were talking about find something that you love or find something that you want to do. Well, it took me, so after the RV one, I was like, hey, I really want to do another podcast. What do I love? What do I want to talk about? And I fought having a podcast about podcasting for 4 years.
Did you
Because
really? You felt it, but you just didn't do it.
no, I'm like, you just can't do a
I
podcast
know
on
that feeling.
podcasting. That's so silly. I was like, but I had to go through all of those things that everyone, the RV one was really easy because I was already doing it for a summit. So it didn't really feel like a podcast I was launching. Whereas like this one, I was like, oh, now it's going to be like that fear that no one's going to listen to it, or like who's going to listen to a podcast about podcasting. And then there's the, oh, I'm not an expert on podcasting, is that imposter syndrome. And then it's like, do I have time to do this? And then it's like, and I don't know all the tech, so I have to have my team do it. And it's just all like all the things that I see our clients go through. I had to go through for those 4 years
Yeah,
before I launched this one. So now
so true.
we understand. Now we get where they're all coming from. They were freaked out about it because the RV one was so easy for me. But it's because it was attached to a different project that wasn't initially like a podcast, right? It didn't have to be the expert on the subject. And
Yeah.
I think that's that. I think
Through
that
your
was
journey, you became the
helpful.
expert. That's great.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah,
cool.
really cool.
So what are some of the benefits, that a business can have by having the podcast, or just the solopreneur even?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I really noticed is like during the pandemic when everyone's shut down their businesses and you weren't able to come and see customers in person or whatever, our business like tripled because people realized all of a sudden, wait, we can talk to them through a podcast or we can reach out to people with a podcast. And so I think that became even more, I think almost a podcast is more essential than a website because you can say all the things at such a deeper level that you say on a website and help engage customers in your organization before they become customers. I think it's really helpful so that when they show up, they're ready to be a customer and they're really well equipped instead of those sales conversations like, so tell me more about what you do, what's your program like. We have some coaches, we work with a lot of coaches, and a lot of them were like, my program was sold out because people showed up, they're like, where's the credit card, where do I put the credit card down, and they were just ready to go because they'd listened to all of the podcast episodes already. So I think that makes it really an easy buying journey for people. And I also think for business owners, it's just a really great way that you can have your customers get to know you on a deeper level than you maybe would share in your interactions in the business place, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, that's great because that's true. Yeah, it's getting people familiar, creating that know, like, and trust thing before they ever really come to engage with you. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and a lot of the shows that we work with now, like one of the things that we talk about right out of the gates is like, what's your plan for your business? How are you integrating the podcast into what you're doing already? Like, I will never stop podcasting because I've positioned my podcast in the way that it does two things. One, it gets me in front of the people who could be my joint venture partners, which is the ask the expert interview. So at the Amplifyou podcast is split into two different kinds of shows. So one is bringing on someone who's an expert that could help our clients get better at their craft, like a voice coach or someone who's really good at marketing on Instagram or something like that. So those are my joint venture partners that I'm looking for.
Cool.
The other type of interview I do is behind the mic, which is bringing people on who have podcasts already that we maybe haven't helped them launch, and we can find out all about their journey. What was that like? How do you like doing these things? What are things that you're doing? So we get to kind of learn what other people are doing, but also it might poke holes in like, oh, you hate doing show notes. Well, do you know we can do this for you if you want? So it's not meant to be a sales conversation, but it can open the door for us working with them. Plus, then if we have worked with them, we get to showcase our clients in the behind the mic interviews and, say, hey, like we just launched the show. It's pretty awesome. This is her story. This is what she came to us with. This is what this show is all about now. Go take a listen, have a listen, give her a review. And so we like to pump up our clients in that way, which is really cool. Then we can showcase them. And oftentimes they say nice things about working with us too. So it works out really good for us too. So because I position the podcast in that way, so I'm constantly in front of potential new clients, existing clients, and new joint venture partners. I never will stop doing it because it just feeds my business.
That's brilliant. Wow. What are some of other than some of the things that we've hit on a little bit, what are ways that people can market and monetize their podcasts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's something everyone wants to know. What's the $1 million question is how do I make money from this thing? And I would say that, sometimes putting an ad in your show is a great thing. Sometimes it's harder to do and it doesn't make any money. So we have to think outside of the box. What are some other ways that you can make money with your podcast and market your podcast? So going on other people's shows is a great way to market your own podcast, lead people back to your show. Having a private podcast is a great way of doing it. There's a text to number, like text the word guest to whatever. If I'm going on a show and talking about podcast guesting, it leads them to this podcast guest playbook, which is 4 or 5 episodes of me talking about podcast guesting. Hey, you want to jump on a call, you want us to book you on a show, this is the service we can do for you. So just little lead magnets that are really good, that are like when you send someone from a podcast to an ebook, you're sending it's like sending someone who only listens to things to read something now, and they're like, that's not the modality I learn in. It's really hard for me to do that. So I'd rather go to something else that I can listen to or watch a video. Seems to be a little bit more of an easier transition. Plus, people are on their phone and they're busy so you got to remember to send them somewhere they can remember. So the wwws that are extremely long and complicated with lots of words in them aren't going to be remembered, but maybe a word in a text to number or something, or a free gift from steve.com, it will be remembered on the podcast. So sending them somewhere easy so that you can keep the relationship going, because that's what we want to do. We just want to take the relationship to the next level so that we can then perhaps get them to come work with us in whatever capacity that is.
I remember when ebooks came out, and that was a big thing. But yeah, if someone offered me an ebook, that wouldn't get me to opt in these days, because that's the last thing I'm going to do,
or get on my newsletter list. No, thank you. I've gotten too many of those.
Right, exactly. But if because like you said, I'm listening to podcasts a lot of times. I mean, I enjoy doing yard work, that's kind of like my therapy time,
Right.
But I'm also listening to a podcast while I'm doing it,
Right.
And so whether you're exercising, driving, whatever, there's just so much, content you can consume while you're doing other things and still be effective at the things you're doing, where, you got to set time aside if you're going to read something. And it's just harder and harder these days.
Jeff, why I think podcasting is so popular, because people are choosing to come to your show to spend time with you. You're not out there. They're not interrupting them on a news feed or something like that. So choosing to spend time with you, which I think makes that audience so much more valuable, because they're going to spend 20 minutes of time with you while they're doing their yard work or driving their car. So it's really great. It's a really great modality. And I think you get to such a deeper understanding of someone by hearing their voice, and where the earphones are literally in their head.
Yeah,
It's a very lucky place we get to be.
No doubt.
And I think the more you can share about yourself on the podcast too, it's so great. Everyone wants to have guests, and I love having guests. It's one of my favorite things to do too. But one of the mistakes I made on my shows is that I went to guests right away, and I didn't let the audience get to know me first before going to guests. And then even so, during the guests, it was all about the guests, and I didn't wrap up the guests with a little bit more about me at the end, or a little bit more something about me at the beginning. Because what the statistics that we see all the time on all the shows we work on is that the number 1 shows are the host only solo shows, and then the number 2 shows would be the guest shows, and then the number 3 shows would be the guests who are famous shows. So those are the least listened to shows, because say you have Tony Robbins on your show, well, you know what Tony Robbins talks about, so you probably not going to listen because you've heard him talk before. So you might go to someone else that you don't know. So I found that fascinating, because it's not what I was expecting.
Yeah, I wasn't either. That is very fascinating. What would you say to that, person who's listening, who maybe has, been struggling, they want to, make a change, what could they do with a podcast? I mean, not necessarily the topics, we've hit on some of those things, but what advice would you give them to, to start a podcast that they could, start to monetize? I mean, it's not going to make them obviously a living right out of the gate, but, to start somewhere. Any advice you give the person?
For sure. I would think the best thing that you can do is become a coach and coaching people through something you've experienced. So I think that's the easiest way, and especially if you're using a podcast, because what you're going to do is you're going to attract a whole bunch of people that are just a few steps behind you. So that whole podcast, you can start the first few episodes we share with our clients to create is like, okay, who are you? What was your story? What was your turning point in your story? What was the mess that you had? What happened? What made you overcome something? And then how have you now implemented that into like a framework that you can then now teach other people how to do, right? So thinking of like for weight loss, right? How did you lose 100 pounds? What was the system you used? And now you're helping coach other people through that same thing. So I feel like something like that is a really good way, kind of like what you're doing here. It's a really great thing, because you have an interest in it, you have experience in it. You don't need to be like an expert in it. You just need to be on the journey. You just need to share your story and your journey with people. And I think that's where people get a bit tripped up with that imposter syndrome, because I'm not a certified coach and I'm not a this or that. I'm like, yeah, but you have real life experience that is far more valuable than any book certification that you're going to get. So, don't discount your real life experience, and just sharing about it, and sharing the great things, the bad things, and the more openly you can share about things, and the more stories you can tell, that people can identify themselves in it, the better show you're going to have, because people are going to really resonate with those stories. When you are becoming a little bit vulnerable and sharing those stories, people start to recognize pieces of themselves in all those stories, and then you have fans forever.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And there's no doubt vulnerability and authenticity is what people, I feel like they're craving, that just goes so far. And, you can make your setback, your trial, whatever, you can make that your superpower. And like you said, you only have to be really one step, two steps ahead of, where that other person is at,
Yeah.
And because that life experience of whatever you went through really adds a lot of value depending on where you're at and what you've done to deal with it.
For sure. One of the other podcasts I've started was called Blissful Parenting. And I was a new mom, and I was like, this would be great. I 300 and something episodes later, like I've interviewed like all the top selling authors on the topic. I've interviewed all like the top coaches on this. So it's allowed me to become a way better parent, because I've just got this like hundreds of hours of like education, and I'm just, interested in the topic. So I was on a journey to learn, and it's for parents of school age kids. So we've made that clear. And what happened was Blissful Parenting started to build a huge email list of like 80,000 parents. So then we can approach the parenting coaches that I had on the show and be like, hey, like we've got a big audience here. Why don't you put something together? We can promote it to the audience and be an affiliate for you. So because we had this platform, I'm not a parenting coach by any means. I don't teach on parenting at all, but I was interested in becoming a better parent. So therefore I took these parents on this journey with me to become a better parent. And we were able to monetize that show with other people's contents and other people's. We even had a free membership site they could come to, where all the gifts that people gave away on the show to our audience were all in one membership area. So we were still collecting everyone's email addresses, but the free gifts from the audience were in there, plus the videos were in there. So instead of going to YouTube, they could go to our membership site to watch the videos. So it was totally free membership. Cool. And then if they wanted extra coaching, there was how many hundreds of parenting coaches in that community. And then the parenting coaches, we then charged a bit of money to be a featured coach within that community. So it was just a way that we were able to monetize. I call that show as our guinea pig. We did a lot of we did a lot of playing around with stuff in that show to kind of see what worked and what didn't work, and how we could monetize it in a way if we're not an expert on the subject, or I don't have a business in parenting. So that was one of the ways that we came up with for that.
That's really cool. I love that. That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you've put in the time, the dues, and you definitely, are somebody that somebody should reach out to if they're looking to start a podcast, because you've been around the block. It sounds like way longer, and you've done a lot of different things, experimented with a lot of different things. You'd really be able to help people get from where they're at to where they want to go much quicker than trying to figure it out on their own.
Yeah.
So,
I wish I had our business around when I was starting.
yeah,
That would have been a lot easier.
no kidding. Just shorten
What's an
the
RSS
path.
feed? I don't know. I don't know what I'm
Yeah,
supposed to do with this
exactly.
thing.
No doubt. Well, do you have any final words as we wrap up for any of those listening?
Yeah, I know your listeners have stories, and they have ideas, or they have things that they've overcome in their lives. And they might look on iTunes, they might look out there and be like, oh yeah, there's already a show on that. I'm not gonna do that. They say, if you have any interest in maybe starting a show, go and be a guest on a couple of shows first and kind of get a taste for it, because the clarity really comes from you sharing your story over and over again. And then it becomes really clear what it is you want to talk about once you start sharing. So being a guest first is always great. It's a little bit less work, and you get to show up and be in front of someone else's audience, which is great. And if you loving it, and watch out, a lot of people get totally addicted to it. They're like, this is so good, I want to do more of it. Then start your own show, and know that yes, there's like hundreds of thousands of parenting shows out there, yet we were still able to grow a humongous podcast list of parents that were wanting to have more advice and more like, it was like a buffet of parenting coaches and experts that they could choose from, all about how to parent 6 to 12-year-olds. So there's a very small niche, but find something that you love, and just don't be afraid to press the mic and press play and just get going. Doesn't have to be perfect. Start messy, and know that everyone changes their direction and everyone changes their focus after 20 episodes. So just keep going after 20 though. Don't stop.
That's the key. Just get started. Yeah.
It's
Don't
called
give up.
season 2. Season 2
Yeah.
is gonna, season 1 might be about cats and dogs, and season 2 might just be about dogs, and that's okay. It's your show.
Such a good point. Well, man, this has been very valuable. I appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk about podcasting. And is there, where can people reach out to you and contact you, Michelle?
Yeah, well, we have a free podcasting blueprint that they can go and check out if they're thinking about being a podcast host or guest. It's amplifyou.com/blueprint is the place to go find it out. And Amplifyou spelled a little bit weird. It's AMPLIFYOU. So we dropped the double Y's in there. So it's amplifyou.com/blueprint.
Awesome. And I'll have that in the show notes as well, folks. So you can just go and find it there. If you don't have anything if you're like me, you won't remember. And if you're not in a place to write it down, then we'll save it for you. Well, thanks again, Michelle, and appreciate you being here, and keep up the great work. We'll be following and learning from you along the way.
Thanks, Steve. You too did an awesome job on this show. I love it. Thanks for having me, guys.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.